Welcome to the Wisconsin in Focus podcast powered by the Center Square. I'm Bruce Walker, Midwest Regional Editor of the Center Square Newswire service. Wisconsin in Focus is a production of America's Talking Network, and you can find all of the Center Square's great podcasts at americastalking.com. We ask you to subscribe to Wisconsin in Focus wherever you listen to your podcast. We're recording today on Thursday, February 2nd, 2023, Groundhog Day. And my co-host, I think I just gave him a promotion. We'll probably have to have some type of org chart meeting over this. But you all know him as that guy who has electric boots and wears a mohair suit. And you read about him in all the magazines. That would be Benjamin Yount. How are you today, sir?
I thought you were going to go all the way through and make it a complete Puxatawny Phil reference and say Benny and the Rat.
Benny,
because that is how we refer to good old Phil. The weather rat apparently saw his shadow today, and so there will be 6 more months of winter, or 6 more weeks of winter.
Yeah, thank you.
But
I have fly rods that are gathering mold right now, so I need to know that it's 6 weeks and not 6 months.
For those of us in cold weather states, though, there's always 6 more weeks worth of winter.
Oh, yeah.
It's not like he comes out and doesn't see the shadow and all of a sudden 70 and sunny. It's going to be 10 degrees in the good land tomorrow. So,
I hear you. So I will probably save my my questions about the nominees for this year's class for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame for Tom Gantert in Michigan. But I don't know if you have any insights on that or not.
I haven't even seen the list. Did it come out today?
Yesterday.
Yeah. I was too busy preparing for rodent weather forecasts.
Right.
What else was I doing? Oh, the ever just encapsulating the thrilling, the must reads on ESSER 3 allocations.
Oh, that was one of the most wonderful segues I think I have ever heard on any podcast ever made. Do tell, Benjamin Yount, our Wisconsin correspondent.
They don't call me a professional for a reason. This is a story that we just filed over at the Center Square, and it is as I put it in the email. It's a bad slug, ESSER 3 spending, but it's actually an incredibly interesting story for 2 reasons. And this is not just Wisconsin. The numbers are going to vary, but this is every single state across the country, and this is something that is, for anyone who has kids in school, it's a big deal. ESSER 3 is the final installment, essentially, of the coronavirus stimulus money. It's the money that Congress threw out the door to help schools during the height of the coronavirus going back to 2020.
Okay, well, listen, let's stop right there. And ESSER is one of those governmental acronyms, and we always have to explain what the acronym stands for. Benjamin Yount.
It is the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund.
There you go.
And thank you for, by the way, letting me get a drink of my diet soda there. But this is the third round of this month, and as we explain in the story, the first round was, all right, kids are going to be learning from home, so let's throw some federal cash out. That went to laptops and hotspots and just sort of the infrastructure that a lot of schools didn't have to help kids learn from home. The second round was to help transition kids back into the classroom. Some of that money went to masks or those plastic dividers that were in many schools. This third round of money is supposed to be earmarked for catching kids back up. The Institute for Reforming Government, who has a transparency tool about Wisconsin's $1.5 billion in ESSER money, said that this is really important, not just because kids are behind, and we see that in every single measure, every single state test, every single national measure, every single national test. But this is a huge year for the kids who were impacted the most when they were sent home in the spring of 2020. Kids who were in kindergarten then are now wrapping up 3rd grade, headed into 4th grade. And any education advocate will tell you that if you can't read by fourth grade, you're behind for life. And so these kids who missed, in some cases, a year and a half or 2 years of early learning. Now, there weren't a lot of kids who were learning to read from scratch from home. Those kids are now at that danger point where they may never catch up. On sort of the flip side, kids who were freshmen in high school when they got sent home at the beginning of the coronavirus are now getting ready to graduate. And so those kids may never catch back up. If they're behind, they're behind. And you're not going to get a senior in high school doing a lot of extra reading come the end of the senior year. And so the focus on this spending, particularly here in Wisconsin, and again, the Institute for Reforming Government has a dashboard where parents can go and search to see how their school is spending this money. The focus now has to be on making sure that the kids who are behind get caught up. That means classroom spending. It doesn't mean building new HVAC systems or building a new football field or, well, we got a couple of $100,000 in federal money.
Let's build a swimming pool. Yeah.
And so this is again, this is part of the minutia of government that sounds wonky, but when you break it down to the end, there are thousands upon thousands upon thousands of kids in each state who would love to have the extra classroom help, who need the extra classroom help, who may not get the extra classroom help. Now, to sort of broaden the picture here, this federal money has to be spent by the fall of 2024. The school budgets for the 2023-2024 school years are being written right now. So what that means is that school districts have to spend an awful lot of money. 2/3 of the $1.5 billion that Wisconsin has not yet been allocated. Now, that doesn't mean spent. It means planned to be spent. And so you're going to have a mad dash from school boards this spring, this summer, and then again next year about this time to get this money out as fast as they can. And if we learned anything from the congressional hearings this week on other coronavirus spending, when there is a mad dash to get money out the door, oftentimes it doesn't go out cleanly or easily or in the most efficient fashion. And that's why the Institute for Reforming Government is out with this transparency tool to say, hey, guys, look, moms, dads, taxpayers, lawmakers, this money is going to be spent, and somebody needs to be keeping an eye to make sure these local schools and the state's Department of Public Education are spending it wisely.
Okay, well, one of the things that I just picked up just doing a quick glance is when you say that 34% of when you say 34% has gone to teachers, that is of all ESSER monies, or
that is
give me some context on that.
Yeah, that you have. I'm trying to find the exact number here so that I can get it right, because this has come in 3 waves. And the way that IRG put it, and Quentin Klangman is the guy that I spoke with, he said about half the money in all total has gone towards education. That's teachers, that's other curriculum, books, school aids. There's been some money for paraprofessionals. The distinction there is that if half the money has been spent on kids, half the other money has been spent on stuff, school buildings, the aforementioned heating and air conditioning. You've got some equipment, you've got some other things that this money was spent on. When they talk about, when IRG talks about this money being spent on teachers, that's good. Again, you don't want schools to be building a brand new high school with this federal coronavirus money. But the problem is that once these teachers are hired, using federal money to pay their salaries, when the federal money runs out, schools are going to now have to figure out a way to come by and find the new money to pay those salaries. And so this is always the warning of don't pay for permanent things with temporary money. Don't pay for things you have to pay for every single year with temporary money. But in all reality, given how there is going to be a mad dash just to spend this cash, the concern of how do we pay the new teachers that we hired back in 2020 or 2021? That's a tomorrow problem for school districts. That's a next year problem for school districts. That's a 2 year from now problem for school districts. And so we'll probably be writing about that in a year or two and say, hey, the bill has come due for all of these teachers hired during the coronavirus. Now we got to figure out what we're going to do.
Well, let me go a little off script here, Ben, and I'm befuddled, which is not uncommon for me. I'm a little bit long in the tooth here, but when I see the millions and the billions of dollars that are being appropriated to schools throughout the country, I'm wondering, why did it take them so cussedly long to actually focus on educating the students? And why is this? Why are we in the third round of monies before the students actually come across as being a priority?
I think that the non-talk show host Ben answer for that, because there is a talk show host Ben answer for that is probably not what we're looking for here on the Wisconsin in Focus podcast. Some of this does come down to triage, that the first round of money really was so that kids can learn from home. And again, you got to remember, my kids, we live in Brookfield. And we've got high-speed internet, and our kids have access to computers. And in our kids' schools, both of them, sent them home with Chromebooks. They had Chromebooks from day one, even when they were in class regular, before the coronavirus. You have some schools, city of Milwaukee, some schools in Madison, but also some schools in poorer rural districts that simply didn't have Chromebooks. They didn't have access. There are some families who live either in the city of Milwaukee or parts of Madison or out in the farm country who may not necessarily have high-speed internet. And so the idea of being able to watch a chemistry lecture on SharePoint or Infinite Campus or whatever the program is, it was difficult. And so there was a need for some of the technological stuff. The talk show host Ben answer comes with round two, as some schools continue to hang on to their concerns from the initial round of the coronavirus. Some schools fought the idea of coming back in person. They came back reluctantly. And, that this is now, okay, they sent the learn from home stuff. That didn't work. Schools reopened, even though some districts didn't want them. And so, now there makes no sense to buy masks and test strips and plastic dividers and, floor tape to make sure that everybody sits 3 feet or 6 feet apart. They finally have to start teaching kids again. They have to start focusing on kids. And so, why did it take so glacially paced long to focus on the kids? Well, that's how education bureaucracy works. And this is one of the reasons why you have so many education advocacy groups out there, because somebody has to sound the alarm. Somebody has to say, hey, what's going on here? And this is at the heart of what the Institute for Reforming Government wants from this dashboard, this tracking system of, okay, mom and dad in the Cedarburg School District, here's the update on your kid's school. Why don't you go down to the school board meeting and see what's going on?
Gotcha. Well, I think that pretty much covers the ground that I wanted to talk to about that, because I'm not a bureaucrat. I wouldn't want to belong to any club that would have someone like me as a member, to quote Groucho Marx. But just a little bit befuddled. I'm not a product of public schools, so I really don't understand a lot of the ins and outs and the intricacies, and let's face it, the politics that go along with this. So yeah. Let's stay on the topic of education, Ben. You've submitted a story this morning, and, well, it's somewhat concerning for this guy who had high school teachers recommend Hunter Thompson and Jack Kerouac, Walt Whitman, and what have you, in my English courses, and who started my first underground newspaper when I was a sophomore in high school. And the University of Wisconsin has conducted a free speech survey, and it just comes across as mind-boggling to me. And I'm throwing to you on this one because, again, I'm just befuddled and dumbfounded.
This is a marked change from when I went to college, from when you went to college, from when my parents went to college. I don't know exactly when it changed, but you're exactly right. When we were college students, if the school said, don't read this book, everybody would have gone out and read this book. If they would have said, don't see this film, we all would have rushed to see the film. Some of that was, here's the middle finger, Dean, you can't tell me what to do, you and your stuffy administrators. But this is not just about reading books that make people think. This is not just about watching movies that some people don't like. This is a huge change. The headline on this free speech survey is that half the kids at UW schools, and again, this was 11,000 responses from 13 different campuses. So it's not just Madison. It's not just Milwaukee. I mean, you can go all the way out to Stout in the western part of the state. But half the students on UW campuses say they don't speak up because they're afraid to. They're afraid to share their opinions on controversial topics. And controversial is one of these code words that it's controversial when you don't like it, but it's accepted when you do. And only things that I like that you don't like are controversial. School choice is controversial. Well, only if you don't like school choice. But this is not students fearing the dean, fearing the man, fearing the university. This is students who are concerned about other students. They're not sure that if they speak up and say, hold on, wait, I don't necessarily agree with your stance on transgender activism, that they will be welcomed by their former students. And most of this is students who are conservative or lean conservative, who are worried that progressive students will come after them. Well, I don't think it's so much getting beaten down on the quad with a baseball bat, but I think that, peer pressure is a real thing, and students, they understand where the mood on campus is. So while you have half of students who say they don't speak up because they're afraid to, you also have about a third of students who want the university to impose limits on who can say what. The survey said about 1 in 3 students want the university to disinvite speakers who may share opinions that some students find offensive. And as somebody who went to a public university, somebody who went to college, that's kind of the point, that you're supposed to hear different viewpoints. It's not supposed to just be hear only what you want to hear. Now, nobody's forcing you to go to the speech. Nobody's forcing you to hear these different opinions. But this survey really does paint a different view of who is on campus and what their thoughts are. That I never thought I would see a day where young men and women, college students who will, many times not be able to shut up, self-censor because they're worried about what other kids in class are going to think or maybe even do. And I never thought that I would see this acceptance. 33% of people say, yeah, I think the man needs to play a role in telling me what I can hear or who can talk to me.
Oh, that would not have gone over very well when I was attending university. And on any given day, you could see lectures by people such as the male star of Deep Throat, or Judith Crist, the film critic. And there was quite the hullabaloo over G. Gordon Liddy for those students who, even 4 years after Watergate, knew who G. Gordon Liddy was. Jane Fonda, who gave a scalding speech against Dow Chemical, which was just down the road from the first university that I attended, and major contributor to the campus, by the way, to their science department. and they threatened to pull all of their money because of terrible things that Ms. Fonda, who apparently holds some pretty controversial views that I guess we won't go into here. But anyway, it was just one of those things where you just wouldn't say, okay, what does this individual have to say? This could be kind of interesting. I remember sitting through my first viewing of Night of the Living Dead with George Romero and thinking, hey, this is kind of cool. But whereas, some people now would just say that this is not acceptable. We have to have some type of default on this that protects us from dangerous points of view.
And that's the thought. Protect us. And this has been an issue boiling for years. And lawmakers at the Capitol, particularly Republican lawmakers, are very interested in free speech ideas because there is the sense that as long as you're a liberal or a progressive, as long as you support the popular ideas among young people, Bernie Sanders could come and be welcomed at the University of Wisconsin with open arms. But Matt Walsh or Ben Shapiro, certainly President Trump, Ron DeSantis would be booed off campus. And that's where this becomes not just an issue of snowflakes, right? Not just an issue of young people who want to live in their little bubble and they don't ever want to be challenged. They're different people. They have a different experience than we did. The worry is that there is an institutional bias at the university. The worry is that there perhaps may be a policy bias. And so the president of the UW system, who's a new guy, comes from the outside. He's not an academic. Jay Rothman, he said that this gives them a foundation so that they can critically examine speech on campus. In the story, we quote one of the professors who spoke at this forum about the free speech survey that happened yesterday, Wednesday. And the professor essentially said, look, I got no problem with students coming out to protest certain speakers. They should be able to do that. And what is unsaid is protests are one thing. Violence is something else. Intimidation is something else. And this notion that the university itself is picking sides. If you are a freshman in environmental studies and you don't want to hear the man from Dow Chemical come and say that the internal combustion engine has freed millions of people from, essential wage slavery, if you don't want to hear him say that napalm worked in Vietnam, guys, no matter what Hanoi Jane said, it worked. If you don't want to do that as a student, you're perfectly free to do that. In fact, that's kind of the point. The worry is what's the university doing? And that's where, as much as the half of kids don't want to speak up, okay, that's concerning. It's terrifying that a third of University of Wisconsin students want the university to come and be mom or dad to protect them from hearing ideas that they don't agree with. That's not what college is supposed to be about. Drink beer, meet girls, watch football, cool.
Not necessarily in that order.
The actual point of college is supposed to be to learn how to think for yourself, to be exposed to new ideas, to, as I put it quite frequently, to expand your mind and not in the LSD kind of way.
Okay, well, I think that's about all the time we have for today. And Ben, thanks a lot. I think some pretty good insights and really important topics. And I think topics like this are the most exciting things to talk about. So keep up the great work, keep up the great stories, and you can find all of Benjamin Yount's fine reporting at thecentersquare.com. And Wisconsin in Focus is powered by the Center Square, a production of America's Talking Network. You can find all of the Center Square's great podcasts at americastalking.com. If you enjoyed this podcast, we ask you to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. I'm Bruce Walker, Great Lakes Regional Editor of the Center Square Newswire Service. Listen for another episode of Wisconsin in Focus next week.